Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about the roast of Tom Brady. All right, okay, let's. So, why should we as dungeon masters, why as we should we as dragon masters look carefully at the roast of Tom Brady? Well, I think the reason why is it shows what can happen if you don't play Dungeons and Dragons. What happens if you don't play Dungeons and Dragons? You cannot recognize evil, right? And increasingly, we're hurtling as a culture into an era where people cannot recognize evil, right? And it's hard. It's hard to recognize evil, right? But you and I, we get practice at it once a week, right? Now I get practice at it twice a week because I go to church. People, boy, people ask me, Scott, why do you talk about Dungeons and Dragons in context to church? Well, guess what? Every time you sit down to Dungeons and Dragons, every single creature, every non-player character, every dungeon master character, every dragon master character has a gigantic alignment label on them, right? 5 decades, it's still there. It's not going anywhere. And I understand there was a very brief moment where I think the designers of D&D very much considered pulling out alignment, and they realized, oh my gosh, this is a load-bearing wall. We pull this thing out, and it breaks. It breaks, right? But you and I, vampire, evil, right? Heroic adventure, good, right? Like it's a Lord. Actually, let's do it this way: Lord Strahd, evil; Strongheart, good, right? Like the world is split into evil people, good people, and an incredibly rare group of people who live in the in between, right? And we are reminded sharply of it every Sunday at the Dungeons and Dragons table, right? Once a week. Evil exists in the world. Good exists in the world. And there's an incredible, rare, incredibly strange group of people who live in between, right? But Kevin Hart, right? Like Bert Kreischer, and Tom Segura. They don't go to church, and they certainly don't spend time at a Dungeons and Dragons table. And so they have absolutely no compass to recognize good and evil when it comes along, right? And so now let's get to the roast of Tom Brady. So I want to be super clear, all right? I watched the roast of Tom Brady, but I skipped every single football player, right? And the reason why is, none of them wrote their own material, right? And I wasn't extremely confident that they would be able to read what was written for them, right? And I did not want to spend time, right, like seeing if they could or not, right? Like I just like. And now you're like, Scott, isn't that a little like dismissive? Well, you are right. Yeah, it is dismissive, and the reason why is just because of the shape of the world. Every now and then, I would say like 2-3 times a year, I end up watching a sports event on television, and one of the most painful parts of my life is watching any reporter ask any athlete any question on television. Hey, you lost today. How'd it feel? Like, who wrote this? And and then these athletes actually giving these horrible answers. Just like, and it's painful to watch. It's painful to hear. It's painful to the reporters. It's painful for the athletes. Like, I just don't like listening to athletes talk. I couldn't. Right. So I do want to be super clear about this. I watched the roast of Tom Brady, and I was shocked and appalled. But I heard something after I watched it that made me do this video. So be patient. We're going to get there together. All right. So I only listened to I only listened to the comedians, and I have to admit, I listened to 30 seconds of Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura. I have never laughed at a single joke either one of those guys has ever done. I think their entire career is based on their friendship with Rogan. I don't think either one of them have. I think Dave Chappelle has more talent in his index finger than both of those guys combined. Right? Like I think it's a little shameful that they call themselves comedians, in my humble opinion. So I watched 30 seconds of them. They had and actually I don't feel bad because literally, and this is really fascinating. I love comedy, right? Increasingly, when a comedian performs, there are guys just like me on YouTube who review every performance of a comedian that's public now. That's astounding. And across the board, people are like, Tom Segura, Bert Kreischer didn't have a joke between the two of them. Literally paid money by Netflix, could not come up with a single laugh out loud moment, right? So I don't feel bad for skipping them, all right? But so I did listen to Nikki Glazer, Kevin Hart, that guy who's at every roast under the sun, right? Like you've seen him at every roast. He's bald and a little big, right? And he was on there. And I think some up and coming guy, and then a few, and I didn't even listen to Al, Jennifer Lopez's current husband, right? The guy who was in Goodwill, the guy who was friends with the guy in Goodwill Hunting, Ben Affleck. Sorry, so I skipped a lot of this, right? But I did hear a lot of these comedians. Now, let's get into this. I was astonished at what I heard. So, one, Kevin Hart, I think Kevin Hart is a spectacularly talented comedian. However, he just went through a divorce, and I think it broke him, right? And he is viciously mean more viciously mean in his comedy than he has ever been. I think there's just like a broken part. There's a jagged, broken part of him now, and he is rubbing it against everything he can at this point, right? And so it really astounded me, right? So he was paid by Netflix to come on and be the MC of this roast, right? And every time, like every other time he would come on and he would just say, F you, Tom Brady, right? And you're like, whoa, man, that's a little harsh, right? And at the beginning, he was like, listen, I'm going to say F you, Tom Brady to you 20 times tonight, but I need you to understand something. I'm not joking. I really don't like you, and I'm only here because you paid me. And I was like, whoa, this is the MC, right? And you're saying you don't want to be there, and you genuinely dislike him, right? And that when you say F you, Tom Brady, you mean it. And I was like, whoa, man, this is how this is starting? Right? And it is. He set the tone, right? And then Nikki Glazer and like 6 other comedians came up, and they all said the same joke. They said, Tom Brady, you failed as a husband and you failed as a father, right? They all said it in a different way, right? And I was like, whoa, man, that's like, you're supposed to roast a guy, like, but you don't like cut him in the deepest place and say things that are insulting to his family. That's too much, right? And what's really astounding to me is when I got finished with it, I was like, wow, that was horrible. I feel really like, I thought Tom Brady was a talented football player, but I just heard 6 people say he's a bad dad and a bad husband, right? And I'm like, why would anyone possibly agree to this, right? And it astounded me. There was massive coverage of this within the comedy community. And I heard the answer. They said it is estimated that he was paid $30 million. $30 million, right? And I was like, oh, that answers it, right? Because honestly, I cannot imagine any husband and father allowing those things to be said. It's unimaginable to me. Unimaginable at any price, right? But if you don't have a compass and you don't know good from evil and you haven't sat at a table every single week for 40 years, right? And had a clear delineation, this is good, this is evil, you don't know it. And I am betting, right? Tom Brady has never sat at a Dungeon Master's table. He's got no guidance there, right? And I don't think he's ever sat in a church, right? Like, because anybody who had ever sat in a church, anybody who had ever sat at a Dungeons & Dragons table would be like, this is clearly evil. This is Lord Strahd content. This ain't Strongheart content, right? And the reality is, I really believe we hit a shockingly new American cultural low with the Tom Brady, roast. And honestly, I'll tell you right now, people are having the conversation. They're saying comedy is dead. You know what? Let it die. Let the roast die. I honestly believe that the Tom Brady roast should be the last American roast in forever. And the reason why is, as a dungeon master, that's Lord Strahd content. That's a dude who accepts human sacrifice, according to Vecna Eve of Ruin, right? And like, that is evil. It was evil. And the reason why we're talking about it today is there was a very good commentator, and the reason why I'm doing this video was I watched this thing and I was like, that was evil. That I don't think we should ever do another roast ever in America's history, right? And I watched another commentator, not right? Like, I watched another commentator and he goes, it was a black mass. And I was like, that's it, man. It was a black mass. It was like a dark, evil ritual. It was abominable. The jokes were way below the belt. Like, saw off. Like, it was bad. It was bad. So, if you go to church, you have a compass. You know good from evil. If you don't, Dungeons and Dragons is going to serve as your church. You will know good from evil, and you will know that there is a incredibly rare group of people who live in the middle, right? And get this, if you don't go to church and you don't play Dungeons and Dragons, you have absolutely zero compass to tell good from evil today. And it is super clear from Tom Brady's roast that no one there had any clue, because they are disconnected from Dungeons and Dragons and disconnected from church and have no more compass to point the difference between good and evil. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.